Slowly. So hi everyone, it's happy to see you all. Great to have you join us in this gathering this afternoon. I'm Roxanne Dault. I'm a member of the board of Insight World Aid and very happy to be here. I'm from very sunny, very warm Montreal, Jojage, land of the Kinikihaga First Nation. So I'm here representing Insight World Aid. Very happy to be here and to offer this opportunity for us as we do this gathering every first Sunday of the month. Insight World Aid has this mission of offering different ways of helping organization and individual to seek to alleviate suffering worldwide. So how can our practice can be a way to help heal herself and others, and inspiring myself from Sharon's new book. So we're here today to have a chat and to practice with our dear teacher, Sharon Salzberg. Welcome, Sharon.
Thank you so much. That's great.
I'm sure that all of you know Sharon very well, but Sharon is a leader in the meditation and was a co-founder of Insight Meditation Society, and has wrote, I didn't know that, but 11 books. Wow. So Sharon is a really important teacher in this lineage and is here to share with us wisdom and also a project that she's involved and very inspired by. And you just launched a new book called Real Change, Mindfulness to Heal Ourselves and the World. So that's really appropriate with this Sangha. So happy to have you here, Sharon, and to have this time to exchange and practice with you. So thank you for saying yes with so much joy.
Yeah, well, thank you. It's really a delight to be with you all, really.
Yeah. So our plan here this afternoon together is gonna just to talk a bit with Sharon about a project that you're involved with, and also practice. We'll have time for practice, and after this we'll have a bit of time if there's any questions about your work or practice. So we have this hour to be together. So just wanted to start, and as you wish, if you want to share a bit about this program that you've been involved in. I think there was a retreat that you did in 2019 at BCBS that kind of started this project, supporting people that suffered, survivors of gun violence, which is quite an important cause.
Yeah, it actually, I think the first seed was planted sometime before, when I got invited to Parkland, Florida, where there had been a school shooting. And this was through one, at that point, recent friend of mine named Shelley Tagilsky, and who was an MBSR teacher who was living right in that community. And so she invited me down, and I went and taught. And amongst the group that I was teaching with were some students from the high school, Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, where the shooting had happened, some teachers, some parents whose children had been injured or killed. And there was one dad in particular who was just like, somehow he was so touched by the experience and the idea of mindfulness and the little bits of practice he brought up. His son had been killed and his younger son had been injured at the shooting. And he went on and did that first 8-week MBSR program because he just wanted to go deeper. And then he told Shelley he wanted to learn how to teach it because he was so moved by it. He wanted to bring it back to his community. So he wasn't able to come to the retreat that you were talking about, but we did host a retreat at the Barry Center for Buddhist Studies, and people came, as we tragically know, from all over because of so many shootings. And it too was a mix of people. We were trying to be careful not to have somebody there like the day after the trauma, so there was a little distance, but even that, I mean, meant people were literally there from all over the country. And there were a number of people at that retreat who were moved in the same way. And there was a strong group of moms from Chicago who, tragically had each lost a child. And some of them decided they too wanted to learn how to teach mindfulness in order to bring it back to their community. So there are not that many places that actually give, I don't know, certificates, I guess you'd say, or and they really wanted that. They wanted to be able to go back to their local youth center or church or civic center or senior center or something with something in hand to say that they'd been qualified. And so finally, we developed this relationship with UC San Diego, which is one of the maybe 3 places. We talked to the people at Brown, we talked to the people in Oxford, and they were really enthused about it. So it's a 2-year program. The cohort is about 40 people, and everybody is a survivor of gun violence in some way. And that was important to them because they also said they felt, like that first dad, Mitch, he said, he felt so strange, like they'd kind of break you into dyads on the first day as one does. And your conversation partner would say, and what brings you here, and he said, I just didn't know what to say, so they really wanted something that was really directed at a community who'd experienced trauma. And so we kind of created this program, which was the MBSR program plus, there are several trauma therapists attached, and there's different considerations. So it's about 40 people. About half were involved in some way in a mass shooting, about half from other forms of gun violence, gangs, police, crime, domestic violence, or suicide. And they're going, they're off and running. It's happening.
And I guess they've as you were sharing with that person, I guess they were really touched by the power of this practice of mindfulness and how it can help them kind of process or be with what's coming up for them.
Yeah, I mean, when we had this retreat at the study center, I mean, you can imagine, like those of you who've been on a retreat, the kind of cultural dislocation about, everything, like, and one of the people said to me, when we come together as a community, it's not usually about healing. It's about legislation, or something we might be able to do. And that, of course, is very important. But I think the primary word from that whole retreat was tools. And I don't know who used it first, one of the instructors, and everyone just picked up on it. Like, somebody said to me, well, I have a therapist and it's really helpful, but they're not giving me tools. What I really wanted tools. And one of the people at that retreat was a teacher at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School. And the retreat ended on a Sunday. They flew back to Florida. She was back at work on Monday, and they had a drill. They had a school drill, as they often do these days. And she said she had a panic attack, and she went and hid in a closet. And then the thought occurred to her, you know what? I have some tools. And she started breathing, and she kind of came back into her body and felt more composed. And so I really began using the word tools much more after that retreat, given their response. And I felt so empowered by that, first of all. And it was such a sense of understanding, actually. In fact, there was one woman from Chicago who was tormented and I knew this from like discussion groups and things like that we're having, by being upset about everything she was feeling. And in her mind, it was cast in a kind of theological context, like, I don't have enough faith in God that I am still so angry and freaked out, and I should be able to, whatever the thing we do to ourselves. And hers was just in that way of languaging. And one of the presentations we had was from a therapist who was talking about the nervous system and the vagus nerve and trauma. And in all honesty, I hope she never sees this, it was very dry, and it was kind of long. And a lot of us were like, oh my God, like, this is a long presentation on the vagus nerve. And yet this one woman came up to me afterwards, and she was like absolutely radiant. And she said to me, it's just my nervous system. It's like all that self-blame and shame. And you wouldn't think, to go through a horrible experience like that and you'd still blame yourself for what you were feeling. And yet we do. And so that kind of contextualization plus the tools of mindfulness gave people a way of being with their incredibly difficult feelings in a different way.
Very powerful. Yeah. Thank you. That's just so powerful, just to frame it at, yeah, my nervous system is doing this. This is how it reacts or protecting me in different ways. And yeah, so powerful. So as you mentioned, there's different tools that we kind of learn and grow from this practice. And in your book, you're talking about this real change, this possibility of healing, of growth, and wisdom that can grow from our practice. So you want to say a few words about that, and how our practice can really be a way of being engaged in this world, and being a person that can also help others in different ways.
Well, sometimes, there are lots of ways of approaching that. A lot of my work, all my early work and teaching was always, we would just hold retreats, and whoever showed up. And we usually didn't know who was in the room anyway, and what they did as livelihood, or, we found out, in the person to person conversation, what they were going through maybe as a human being. But it wasn't like a group of teachers, a group of lawyers, things like that. And later on in the evolution of my own work, I began working a whole lot more with the people we usually call caregivers, who either in their personal life or in their professional life are really, in a way, kind of on the front lines of suffering and trying to make a difference for a family member, or through a system, through a classroom, through a hospice, something. And it got pronounced through these programs I was doing through the Garrison Institute in Garrison, New York, first for domestic violence shelter workers, and then for directors and supervisors of shelters. And then that program went international, and it was international humanitarian aid workers for a long time, like people who say were working in the Syrian refugee camps, and then, it's come back domestically for frontline medical personnel. And so, this has a special place in my heart, these people. And so the other part of it is that, I think we see in the world so clearly, like, the kind of coldness and cruelty that can exist from a lack of empathy, really not seeing ourselves in one another. And I used to look at, like, all the programs that were beginning and happening about empathy training. And I thought, well, that's great. That's wonderful. But what about my people? They have plenty of empathy. They're burning out for some other reason. It's not from a lack of empathy. It's from lack of boundaries or lack of balance, like maybe not enough compassion for themselves, along with compassion for others, and lots of reasons. And so, and And I realized that activists or change makers are very, very similar in terms of their experience. And so the tools we use are about those things, about greater balance, to have compassion for oneself as well as for others, an ability to be with a changing array of emotions, some very painful emotions, an ability to remember to take in the joy, because when you are doing that kind of work, it's so easy to just feel it's wrong, to experience relief or rest or joy, because look at the terrible suffering, greater equanimity and a sense of boundaries. Like somehow the design of the universe is not one where I'm in actual control. I will do everything I can, and I should as a human being, to try to make a difference. And it's not going to be like, I once said to a group of people that I felt if I were in charge of the universe, it would be a much better world. And someone in the room challenged me and they said, "Are you sure?" And I said, "I am really sure, but it's not going to be. So how do we bring that kind of wisdom into our work and our efforts?" And, so everything I did with the caregivers, I found really applicable to activists as well. And I think it's a tremendous asset to have the ability to cultivate those strengths.
And do you find, so you've been kind of the how can I say that, you've been holding this practice of metta, of loving kindness, and kind of being the what's the word, radiating this practice in the Western world a lot. And how do you feel that this practice of metta has played an important role in actually supporting people in this way of being burned out, or again, knowing or learning how to have boundaries? And how does this practice versus mindfulness, how do you see both of them being important tools?
Yeah, I think they are both important tools. The first practice I learned was mindfulness. I went to India a lot of years ago, more than 50 years ago, and began practice 50 years ago. January 7th, 1971 was the beginning of my first retreat. And that was a mindfulness retreat led by S.N. Goenka. And right at the end of the retreat, he did a little loving kindness meditation. It was almost like a ceremonial way of saying goodbye. And it just captivated me. I thought, what's that one? But I didn't really have anyone to teach it to me. They're very supportive practices, but they're also a little different. Mindfulness practices are designed to have us come closer to the truth of our experience, without so many filters and conditioned reactions and all of that, projections. Whereas practices like loving kindness, I find, are more like what I call a stretch. It's realizing like I have certain habits of attention, even certain ruts of attention, and it takes some intentionality to look at from a different angle at myself or others, and not force or not coercion, but people think it is, and that's often, and that's why they don't like the thought of it. But it does take intentionality. So probably the closest example I ever have found is like a gratitude reflection, where you think about, or you write down 3 things at night that you're grateful for from the day. And I always say that, first of all, it doesn't need to be something grandiose or magnificent. And I also say, it doesn't come naturally to me. It's not my personal conditioning. It's not how my family was. It's not my cultural conditioning. I'm so much more likely to come to the end of the day and think about what I can complain about. I didn't show up in the way I had hoped to, or that person disappointed me, or back in the day when I was traveling incessantly, there was always an airline or something, that's just where my attention would go as habit. And it takes intentionality for me to say, what else happened today? Anything else? Like anything good? So it's like stretching. It's like leaving the terrain that's so comfortable and familiar and limited and saying, what's also true? Like people do get squeamish often. They think they're moving from something that's true to something that's phony, but it's not that. It's another truth angle, but often unvisited or not visited as much. So loving kindness practices like that. Like what about, as an example, all the people we tend to look through, we objectify, we take for granted, we don't really see. And the example we've been using for like 45 years is like the checkout person in the supermarket. Think of that, in these days. And so what happens when we look at them instead of through them? What happens when we make a point of kind of holding them in our heart and wishing them well? And that's really how those practices work. So they're both really important. I think that one of the things loving kindness, one of the gifts loving kindness practices given me, I think, is really always remembering to connect to something bigger. We live in an interconnected universe. That's just the truth of things. And I see loving kindness more as producing a very, very deep knowing of that than actually being about a particular emotion or feeling like that's great when it happens, but it doesn't always happen and it doesn't matter, truly, I don't think. I think what's really important is that deep knowing that our lives have something to do with one another, and it's what that practice is designed for. It is really because of that stretch. But we need mindfulness too. The other thing I would say in terms of my history with loving kindness practice was because it was only in 1985 that I got to go to Burma and do 3 months of loving kindness meditation, and then came back and started teaching it. Was that I think there are a couple of things about mindfulness which are interesting. One is the word itself can sound so cold and kind of clinical. And I hear a lot these days people struggle to make up for that. And so I hear it called warm mindfulness or kindfulness or heartful mindfulness or loving awareness, or because what people are really coming to is like the secret ingredient is a kind of loving kindness. It's not that easy, to have all these emotions come up and not be judging. It just isn't that easy. But if you have cultivated more compassion for yourself, for example, it's a lot easier. It's a lot more realistic. And so in some ways, it doesn't have to be through loving kindness practice, but just that quality is really more and more essential in actually doing mindfulness. And we can cultivate that in many ways. Even just doing mindfulness practice, it will strengthen, but you can also devote oneself to having more of a cultivation of that, and it will come right into the mindfulness practice.
Thank you, Sharon. So we'll have more time, maybe a bit later, to talk about this program you're involved in, but maybe have some time to practice together. So I'll let you take over. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, no, I'm tempted to do some loving kindness practice since I went into all that. Is that okay? Will you?
Yes, please.
Okay, so there are many ways of doing this practice. And if you're familiar with that, please do it in your own way, however you feel comfortable. I'll guide you in the way that I, tend to do it, which is through the silent repetition of phrases. They say in any one moment, one of 3 things might be predominant. One is the sense of the recipient. Maybe you're offering loving kindness to a friend, and it's either through an image or just a feeling like they're right here. That might be predominant. One is the actual sense of connection. that might be predominant, or a phrase that is the resting place for attention, like may you be happy, may you be peaceful, something like that. And the way I learned was really primarily through phrases. So that's how I tend to teach it. And it's worked for me in part because the emotional feeling can come and go. And I've honestly done hours of this practice thinking nothing was happening because it wasn't a warm, gushy feeling, and something was happening, sure enough. So it just comes and goes. It doesn't actually measure, whether it's working or not. And you might have a strong sense of the recipient, or maybe that's not so prominent, but you can count on the phrase. So the way I do it is the silent repetition of certain phrases. The phrases are the offering of the heart, and we gather our attention behind one phrase at a time. You don't have to try to pump up a certain emotion or feeling. The power of the practice is in that gathering. And when your attention wanders, because it will, and you realize it, see if you can gently let go and just come back. So we make this offering to a variety of beings, ourselves, those we feel close to. There are lots of possibilities. The basic bookends are usually starting with ourselves and ending with all beings everywhere. And what we do in the middle might change all the time. If you have this practice and you use phrases, you have phrases. So you're welcome to keep on using them. Common phrases these days, beginning with oneself, would be things like, may I be safe, be happy, be healthy, live with ease. Live with ease means in the things of day-to-day life, like livelihood or family, may it not be such a struggle. May I live with ease. May I be safe, be happy, be healthy, live with ease. You can use these phrases or any phrases. People often say to me, because of the grammatical construct, who am I asking? Well, we're not asking anybody anything. It's gift giving, it's offering. It's like handing someone a birthday card and saying, may you have a great year. It's like that. May I be safe. So we'll start with offering to ourselves. See if you can repeat whatever phrases you're using with enough space and enough silence so that it's a rhythm that's pleasing to you. And when your attention might start to wander, truly, it's okay. You can notice that, see if you can let go, and just begin again. And see if you can bring to mind a benefactor. It's someone who's helped you. Maybe they've helped you directly. They've helped pick you up when you've fallen down, or maybe you've never met them. They've inspired you from afar. This is like an embodiment of the force of love for you. Could be an adult, could be a child, could be a pet. The texts say this is the one whom when you think of them, you smile. So is there someone who just like lifts you, lifts your spirits when you think of them? If so, you can bring them here. Get an image of them, say their name to yourself, and begin offering the phrases of loving kindness to them. May you be safe, be happy, be healthy, live with ease, or whatever your phrases may be. And even if the words aren't perfect, it's okay, because they're the conduit for the heart's energy, so they're serving us. Just for fun, for a few moments, let's have that benefactor offer loving kindness back to you. So you can feel yourself as the recipient, as they are repeating phrases for you. May you be safe, be happy, be healthy, live with ease, or whatever your phrases are. And all kinds of different feelings might come up. You may feel grateful, you may feel mortified, whatever it is. See if that feeling can wash through you as you steady your attention on the repetition of the phrases. And let's begin to offer loving kindness to someone who's having a difficult time right now. Seem to feel alone or struggling in some way. So if someone comes to mind, you can bring them here, get an image of them, say their name to yourself, get a feeling for their presence, and see what happens as you offer the phrases of loving kindness to them. May you be safe, be happy, be healthy, live with ease. And let's offer loving kindness to a group, whoever comes to mind. Friends, family, colleagues, those doing well, those not doing so well. Let's just see who arrives. May you be safe, be happy, be healthy, live with ease. And then all beings everywhere, all people, all creatures, all those in existence, near and far, known and unknown. May all beings be safe, be happy, be healthy, live with ease. And when you feel ready, you can open your eyes or lift your gaze, and we'll end the meditation.
Thank you so much, Sharon.
Thank you.
Yeah. Ooh. So still have a few minutes left together, but just wanted to restate kind of this engagement that you have with this group to train this trauma-informed training, to train people that survivors of gun violence that are going to bring it back into their communities. And I think this word of engagement and practice of service really plays out there, and the importance of having this practice as a tool to help, so that each other can support all that is unfolding for them. So thank you for doing that work, important work, and using your practice as a way of healing for everybody. So just want to name that Inside World Aid, we're really want to support that program, and any donation that are coming in at the Inside World Aid during the month of June are going to be offered to support those people that are being trained in any form that might take. And so there's information on their website about that. But we still have a couple of minutes if people have questions. I want to share anything. You can either write in the chat or maybe raise your hand, and it might be about this project, this program, or about how our practice can be a form of engagement in the world. Yes, Jeff.
Thank you, Sharon and Roxanne. I have a question. I took the MBSR class, and there's a heavy component, not the trauma class, but I understand what you're saying. This program is based on the MBSR. Heavy component on the body and not just the body in stasis, like when we sit, or they do a lot of body scans in there, but the body in movement. So there's a mindful yoga and some walking meditation. And I was just wondering, with this training program, are there, because it seems like trauma, part of it that I've experienced is kind of stuck energy. And it just, movement has a way of breaking that open, or giving it air to breathe, so to speak. And I'm just wondering, with this training program, if there is physical exercises or movement meditations. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think San Diego in particular has been very innovative in that they use there's so many initials, cognitive mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, as well as mindfulness-based stress reduction. And they definitely use movement as part of the whole process. And they've really fleshed out a whole program. The extra component for these folks is really the trauma-informed part. So that's been really important. Like one of the things I've really admired about MBSR through the years is that its instructors often form a community, and so then there's a sense of continuing education. And, so I've been brought in sometimes, like in the tri-state area of New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania, to teach loving kindness to instructors. And I've listened to them with one another talking about the body scan as one example, and the kinds of experiences people have, just moving their attention through the body. And as somebody said to me very early on, it wasn't about something I had said, but it was about some retreat at IMS. They said, there's always trauma in the room. You have to understand that. And so I would be watching these instructors say, well, I was leading a body scan and somebody freaked out because something started coming up. And what do you say when that happens? This is what I say. And so I've seen that the need for a more explicit trauma-informed yoga, trauma-informed body scan even has been clear to the people delivering it. for years. And San Diego, I think, has really been in the forefront of trying to make that happen as the curriculum. Because as we know, once you pay attention to your body from within your body, a lot of stuff does come up.
Any other question that people might have for Sharon? I think we're all full of metta.
Yeah,
Yes.
Jeff has another question.
Yeah, Jeff, go ahead.
Another question I have is, I know that Peter Levine has developed this whole program on, I think he calls it somatic experiencing. And it's been around for a while, and specifically looking at trauma and, certainly influences of mindfulness and Buddhism there. But I just wonder if this program that you're involved with has used any of those techniques or reached out with him, or, kind of, is this kind of a hybrid, or I don't know if you have any thoughts on or know anything about, somatic experiencing.
I do. I can speak more about the retreat we did in Barrie than I can about how much is, infiltrating the actual curriculum, but I suspect a lot. That's why we made a point of having trauma therapists as part of the package that people receive. They have individual guidance from people, and that's often, a lot of people these days are using somatic experience. I will say, when we did this retreat in Barrie, I wish I could remember, like, people do these amazing exercises, where, like, if you need to feel protected and you're in conversation with, like, some toxic person, somebody did this great demonstration. It's like you'd never know that you're, like, creating this wall, this imaginary wall energetically, because they just, like, brush their hair. So, it was like, it was very casual. You'd never know, but there were a lot of things like that, and certainly grounding exercises and breathing, and it's all in that context. And the principle that I think you find, one of the principles you find that's very similar, even in classic mindfulness instruction, although it's very understated, is that you need to titrate your exposure to what's really difficult. Like, many people in the meditation world get into this kind of over heroic mentality. Like, I'm going to sit with this painful, horrible mess, that I'm feeling until I come through the other side. And it's so painful, and we get exhausted. And really, both trauma therapy and mindfulness instruction would say you don't need to do that, because the point isn't to suffer. The point is to relate to everything in a different way, a more open, spacious, balanced way. And even U Pandita Sayadaw, who was one of my teachers, who was, like, really fierce, massively fierce and intense. He came here in 1984 and taught this 3-month retreat. And somebody asked him in the meditation hall, how long should I be with physical pain before I move my attention to something that's easier to be with, like listening to sound, or this would be right out of somatic therapy, actually, something in your body that is comforting, rather than arousing in the sense of, triggering. I try not to say triggering because the gun violence community doesn't like it. So, you know what I mean? You were with a painful feeling. It's right to move to something that's more ease-filled, and we get, like, a little restored, and then we can go back to the painful feeling. and then we leave it again. And that's very difficult to trust. You know, people, I've given that instruction like a billion times. Like I heard U Pandita say that in the meditation hall, and he was like the toughest teacher I ever had, you know. And I literally, someone asked him that question. I thought he was going to say you should be with the pain until you fall over. I really did. And he didn't. He said, be with it a little bit, move to something that's easier. Be with it a little bit, move to something that's easier. And I was like astonished. You know, and ever since I've given that instruction over and over again. People don't tend to like it. Like, you don't think I can do the real thing. You think I'm a coward, you know, you don't think I have the courage. And it's really not that. It's just like, this is how it's going to work. As U Pandita said in response to that question, he said, it's not wrong to just like be with the pain and be with the pain and be with the pain, but you'll likely get exhausted. So why not build in balance all along the way? So I think, you know, the little bit I do know about somatic therapy and things like that, I see a lot of similarities with some of the fundamental principles of mindfulness, but it's hard to always be in harmony with those fundamental principles because it goes against a lot of our kind of psychological craving.
And I can agree. And I'm a somatic experiencing practitioner, so
there you go.
I can agree that it's quite similar, and you know, it's about learning to. Peter Levine says that trauma is not what happens to us, but what we hold inside without an empathetic witness. And I find that mindfulness really offers that opportunity to slowly, as you were saying, go into the difficult with a lot of care. And yeah, so thank you so much, Sharon, for your time. And we'll end if you want to share the merits for us for this time together.
Sure. Merit, if anybody is not familiar with the concept, is based on the idea that when we do something toward the good, when we inquire, we seek to learn, we're generous or we're kind, or we meditate, even if it feels like we didn't have any concentration, that generates a very positive energy. So that's the merit. And traditionally, having generated it, we offer it, we dedicate it. So the first step of that, and I'll guide you through as though were my words, and you can substitute whatever words make sense to you. The first step is actually to feel it. It's taking some delight. Having spent this time together, there are lots of ways we can spend time. So this is not conceit or arrogance. This is like delight in goodness, and you let that fill you. You actually feel it. And then we offer it first to those who've helped us, whoever comes to mind. And the way that I do it is through saying silently, I share the merit of my practice with you. May you be happy. May you be peaceful. And those whom you know are hurting or struggling, as an affirmation of the fact that our practice could never be just for ourselves alone. I share the merit of my practice with you. May you be happy. May you be peaceful. And with one another, as we've co-created this experience, and finally, all beings everywhere. May the merit of my practice be for the happiness and benefit of all beings. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Sharon, for your time, spending well spent time together. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Well, be happy.